Hi everyone, I'm Kian, and for this HOTH workshop, I'll be giving you guys a bit of an introduction to AI, so let's just get right into it. Here's an overview of everything that's going to be covered in this presentation. I'll start by going over what is AI, so we'll talk about it conceptually, and then how it differs from an algorithm. Then we'll dive into generative AIs like ChatGPT, and then for the second part of the project, I'll walk you through how to use OpenAI in your project step by step. Okay, so what is AI anyways? You're probably already familiar with ChatGPT, and you might even use it to do your homework for you. Or you might have just heard the term AI on the news and have been slightly confused by what it really means. AI, or artificial intelligence, essentially is just the evolving field of technology where computers simulate human functions by thinking. Note that thinking here is in quotes because the computers are not actually thinking, but you'll understand why later. Okay, so what's the difference between AI and an algorithm? You guys might already be familiar with what an algorithm is, but it's essentially something that takes in an input, applies a set of well-defined rules, and generates a specific output. For example, if I asked the algorithm, what is 70 degrees Fahrenheit in Celsius, it would apply a set of predefined rules. In this case, it would be subtracting 32 and multiplying by 5/9 to spit out 21.1 degrees Celsius. Okay, that's great, but that's not really how the human brain works. If I was to ask you, how will the weather be tomorrow, you're not really going to use a set of strictly defined rules to answer me. Instead, you're going to rely on things like your memories, your experiences, and your intuitions. And you might say something like, oh, probably around 70 degrees, and it might rain in the afternoon. Similarly, AI models also don't rely on strictly defined sets of rules. In order to mimic human thinking, they have things like data sets, which just means large amount of data you provide to it. Instead of experiences, they have pattern recognition, which is just the analysis of trends within those data sets. And they don't have intuitions, but they have probability, which just means they can predict the likeliness of different possible outcomes using the data set. Okay, and the AI might spit out something like, tomorrow, Thursday, February 13th, 2025, LA is expected to experience cool temperatures, and so on. So that's essentially the most important part of AI, which is machine learning. That just means allowing computers to learn from data, identify patterns, and make decisions without being explicitly programmed for specific tasks, like an algorithm would entail. Instead, they use their analysis of data sets and evolve over time to generate better outputs, much like how humans would learn from experience. And yes, there is a lot of boring mathy stuff that explains how the data analysis happens, but we're not going to get too deep into that. What I really want you to take away from this lecture is that AI involves an input, which is given to a machine learning process which allows the AI to learn from the data in that input and then generate outputs based on its training. In this example, our AI might be given a large data set of images of cars, and then when you give it an image, the machine learning process can tell whether there's a car in that image or not. And if that sounds interesting to you, before I move on, I'd recommend looking into computer vision, which is just a subset of AI where computers can recognize and understand objects in images or videos. That's pretty cool, right? Well, if you want to implement computer vision into your project, I'd highly recommend finding this video on YouTube where some other ACM Hack officers go over using OpenCV for computer vision. But okay, what is generative AI? An example I mentioned earlier about AI was that you can feed it a dataset of weather patterns and it would spit out the likely weather for tomorrow. Generative AI, though, like ChatGPT, is a subset of AI that's not just used to analyze data, but it's used to create new content in the form of text, audio, images, or even video. For example, if you were to give ChatGPT a dataset of everything on Google, it could, for example, generate an image that mimics an image that's found on the web. It could also generate text that resembles text that's posted on the web. And if you were to give it a question, it could use all the information on the web to generate an accurate response to your question. How cool is that? Okay, but how does that even work in the first place? You can see here, this is a screenshot of me talking to ChatGPT. I said, hi ChatGPT, how are you? And it said, hey Kian, I'm doing well, thanks for asking. How about you? Anything exciting going on? So contrary to how it may seem, ChatGPT isn't actually thinking in the human sense of that word. It's actually employing a really clever process of analyzing your response, and I'll explain that right here. Okay. ChatGPT is what is known as an LLM, or a large language model, which essentially just predicts a token in a sequence of different tokens. And a token is just a word or a part of a word. So for example, if you were to give an LLM, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy blank, it might estimate that the next token would be cat, dog, fish, or something of that nature. Similarly, if I was to give it a question, it could generate an accurate response by using its dataset of a ton of different texts across the web, and it would sort of predict each word one by one. But let me break this down to avoid confusion. I'll start with a simpler example of an LLM, which is the autocomplete on Google's search engine. When I search up Flight 2 on Google, it comes up with a list of possible things I might want to search up, starting with Flight 2. This is similar with the ChatGPT process of creating a grammatically correct response that's relevant to your question. Okay, let me break down how both these processes work. First, the prompt is split up into tokens. This is actually called tokenization. Remember that a token is usually a word, but it can also be a part of a word. Here my prompt is split into two tokens, which are flight and 2. The next step is called embedding, where basically each token is converted into a vector. This means that the token is given some purely mathematical form. For example, if our vectors are in 3 dimensions, the token 2 could be given the following embedding. Now the reason we do this is because converting a word into a set of numbers allows the computer to better understand the word's semantic meanings, the relationship between words, sentiment, and other things like that. This is kind of confusing, so let me just break it down using this example I found online. Let's say we were to take the embedding of the word aunt, uncle, woman, and man. We could estimate that the embedding, or subtracting the embedding of aunt minus uncle and subtracting woman minus man would produce a similar outcome. You can see that we're using math to kind of isolate the meaning of, or an aspect of the meaning of a word. And in this example, that aspect is the gender of these nouns. So yeah, going back to our main example, embedding these tokens would allow us to kind of capture the meaning in a mathematical sense so the computer can analyze. However, you should know that this diagram is a little bit misleading because it shows the token being embedded in 3 dimensions, whereas in real AI models, they're embedded in up to 1024 dimensions. Isn't that crazy? So yeah, the real embedding would be a lot more accurate, but it would also take up a lot more memory. And yeah, it would look something like this, but with a lot more values. Okay. From there, the AI does a number of things to kind of enhance its responses. The first of these is a self-attention mechanism. And all that really means is that it allows the AI to evaluate which tokens in our series of tokens are more important to the overall meaning of our prompt. For example, in this example, the AI would likely tell that the word flight is a lot more important than the word to in means of contributing to the overall meaning. Next, it would do something called context-aware embedding. All that means is that while we're embedding each specific token, we also consider the context of that token. For example, when we're embedding the word flight, we see that the next word is the word to. And from this, we can determine, in this context, flight means a trip made in an airplane or spacecraft, and not a group of similar beings or objects flying through the air. So when we analyze the context of a token, we can actually tell what it means, and we can also do things like analyze word relationships and semantic meaning. Okay, another thing the AI does is randomness. So you can see here, I asked ChatGPT for a good place to fly 4 different times, and each time it gave me a different answer. How does this happen, you might be thinking? So you might remember that when I searched up on Google the words flight 2, it showed me a variety of different possible responses. But ChatGPT can only really show one response. So the ChatGPT model always needs something that's called temperature. Temperature is just a number that controls the randomness of a model's output. Let's say the ChatGPT LLM generates the same list of places that Google generated, but it can only choose one to tell me about. Well, in a model with lower temperature, the model will be more deterministic, so we'll consistently reply with the top option, which in this case is Japan. But in a model with higher temperature, the response will be more random and diverse. This means that ChatGPT could reply with Japan, but it could also reply with Germany, or even any of the places on the list. The last feature I'll be talking about is chain of thought, which is actually a relatively new addition to ChatGPT. They came out with the GPT-4 models in around March of 2023. So yeah, let's say I asked ChatGPT, how do spiders make silk, and why don't they get stuck in their own webs? Now that's a pretty complicated question. If I was to just throw that into the LLM, the answer wouldn't be so great. So instead, what ChatGPT does is it's going to break down the question into smaller pieces. Essentially here, it's going to ask itself different smaller questions that help it better understand the question. For example, first it could ask, what is the context of this question, and how can it be broken down? It could then ask, what relevant facts do I already know about spiders and silk? And then it could ask itself, how do I link these concepts, and how do I synthesize this information in a way that lets me present it simply to the user? So yeah, this is kind of a simplified example, and this diagram I just made up. It's completely random, but I want you to understand that chain of thought allows AI to improve its reasoning by breaking down the question into smaller parts, essentially. Okay, now that you have a good understanding of how ChatGPT works, let me show you how to use OpenAI in your project by implementing ChatGPT. But first, you might be thinking, how would I use ChatGPT if it's essentially just a chat box that answers questions? Well, we're going to be using the OpenAI API, which basically allows us to take text from our program, run it through ChatGPT, and then use the output back in the program itself. I'm going to be building a very simple project using the OpenAI API, which is going to be a recipe suggestion app. So this app is just going to take a user input that's going to tell them the ingredients they have and the type of meal they want to eat, and then it's going to output a recipe for a food item that they can make. Okay, so let's get into the demo. Welcome to the Recipe Suggestions app demo, and let's just get right into it. I'm going to open a browser. I'm going to type in OpenAI API, and I'm going to click the first link, and that's going to take me to the OpenAI platform page. I'm going to sign up for an account. I'm going to use my demo Gmail account, but obviously use whatever account you're comfortable with. I'm going to make a random password. Okay, let me just enter this code. Okay. For my name, I'm just going to give it my name, and then I'm going to make up a random birthday. I'm not born in 1968. Okay. Okay. Now, for organization, I'm just going to type UCLA, but you can type in whatever. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to say I'm somewhat technical, but yeah. Okay. We'll invite later. And then here's what matters. This is going to allow me to create an API key. I'm just going to give it the default name and default project name. But I will make sure to copy down this key. This is very important. You don't want to lose this, and you don't want to share this with anyone. I'm putting mine on the screen, but by the time you're watching this video, it's already going to be deleted. So yeah, make sure to save it somewhere. I'm going to be putting it in that little text file. And yeah, okay. And then I'm not going to add any money. Yeah. And then this is the quick start. This will just walk you through a lot of things like creating your first AI, or you could just watch this demo and I'll just go over everything step by step. So yeah, and then coming back to this dashboard, I can see my API test key, and you can't access the key, but you can delete it and edit it and things like that. Okay, I'm going to open a terminal. I'm going to make sure that I have Python installed. If you don't have Python installed, you can always go to this app, or this website, sorry, python.org, and install it through the downloads tab. So yeah, but then if it shows you the Python version, then you know you have it installed. Okay. I'm going to open up VS Code, and let's just open a new folder, and I'm just going to call it HOTH demo, but call it anything you want. This is just going to be where my coding will take place. So yeah, I'm going to create a new Python file. I can just do this because I have the Python extension installed already for VS Code. But if you don't, you can go on where I'm right now at the extensions page and install and enable Python, which is pretty simple. Okay, going back, I'm going to create that Python file like I said. I'm going to call it something. You can call it anything, but I'm personally just going to call it main.py. Okay, now I'm going to open a new terminal, and I can create my Python virtual environment from here. I'm going to type in python -m venv, and I'm going to activate it by writing in this code. And this is just for my Mac, but I'll put on what you need for Windows just on the screen. So yeah, and then you can see on the side here, now we're working within that virtual environment. Okay. From here, I'm going to do pip install OpenAI. This is just going to this is going to install that OpenAI module into my Python package. So yeah, and then when I type pip list, you should see OpenAI there if you installed it correctly. So yeah. Now that we have OpenAI installed, I'm just going to clear the terminal and then zoom out. For our code to work, I need to make sure my system has access to my API key. So I'm going to type in export OpenAI underscore API key, all in caps, and then equals, and then in quotes, I'm just going to copy paste the API key that I had saved before. And essentially, this is just going to give that my code or the OpenAI module access to my key so I can access the account I made earlier, or the API. I'm just going to zoom in real quick, and then we'll just start with the coding. Okay, I'm going to type from OpenAI, import OpenAI, and that's just going to import that OpenAI module that we installed earlier. I'm going to do client equals OpenAI. This is going to create an instance of the OpenAI client that we need for the API. Now, this is all pretty boilerplate stuff, but from here on, it's going to be more specific to like the program. So yeah, I'm going to type in ingredients equals input. What ingredients do you have? Okay, this is just going to save that variable of the ingredients I want into a string called ingredients. And I'm going to do same with preference, and I'm going to ask, what do you feel like eating? Okay, then I'm going to type in completion equals client dot chat dot completion dot create. This is just boilerplate OpenAI stuff. It calls the API to chat with it. I'm going to specify the model. I'm going to do GPT-4o mini because that's the one I don't have to pay for. And then I'm going to type in message. So message expects two arrays usually, or two sort of parameters. The first one is just this boilerplate thing that essentially specifies what it is. So I'm going to type, it's going to be role system content, your helpful assistant. And then for the second one, you're going to type role user and then content. And then we're actually going to type in the message that we want. So I'm going to make an F string, and I'm going to say, what meal can I make with the following ingredients? And I'm going to give it the ingredient string that we saved earlier. And then I'm going to write if I have, if I feel like eating, and then I'm going to give it the preference that we specified earlier. Okay, now that that's done, let me move on. Okay, and then now we're going to specify the temperature that I talked about earlier. I think something like 0.7 is a good starting temperature, but you can mess with that once you build your own model. And then print completion.choice is 0, which is going to give us the first choice that OpenAI generates, .message.content. Okay, and that should be our program. I forgot I need to put a comma there, and yeah, now I just have to build the program and run it by doing python main.py, and you'll see what ingredients do you have. I have cheese, pepperoni, and bread, and tomatoes sauce. And what do you feel like eating? I feel like eating an Italian dish. Okay. And okay, great. It's telling me to make a pepperoni pizza, and it's giving me all the all the instructions and ingredients and everything. And okay, amazing. Okay, congrats. We're now done with the demo, and you should now understand how to build a simple app using that OpenAI API. Now, if you want to go deeper into the world of AI, I'd super recommend checking out OpenAI documentation. I put the link on the screen for their quick start document, which kind of goes over a lot of the same stuff I went over in the demo. But if you scroll down at the bottom, there's a part called next steps, and that kind of tells you all the things you can do from here on. Things like checking out the embeddings, doing image generation. Yeah, I totally recommend you should definitely check it out if you want to use AI or you want to dive deeper into just past the surface level of things you can do with AI. Okay, just because I think the OpenAI documentation is super helpful, I'm going to provide another kind of quick demo showing you guys how to just navigate this website. This is what the main page of OpenAI platform looks like. The best way to, I think, get started would be to read over this quick start documentation. It does, like I said, go over some of the same stuff I went over in the demo. And please know you can change the language that you're working with, and in the demo we did Python, but obviously feel free to use JavaScript, and then maybe you can use it in your terminal with curl and things like that. Yeah, and then this is what I was talking about. Next steps kind of tells you what you can do from here on after making a simple API request. I'll just go over like a couple things that I think could be helpful, or just things I personally find really interesting. The first would be image generation. Yeah, this just allows you to make any type of like AI based image from a prompt that you give the AI model, and it tells you about the different models, how the image is generated, the I guess size and quality, and then you can just use the code they give you. And yeah, I mean, it's seems pretty helpful, and I think it'd be really cool something. And then yeah, you can change the language from JavaScript to Python, and yeah, I think this would be really helpful, and I find it interesting to maybe use in a project. Another thing I think could be cool is vision. Something we talked about computer vision earlier, but I think I mentioned that there is a hack workshop on OpenCV, but also you can use this if you want to use ChatGPT's vision model. It kind of just goes over here. You can see like you're importing the same stuff kind of we did earlier, but instead you're giving it an image and through a URL, and you can kind of just play around with it, see what happens, read through this documentation. It'll tell you exactly what you need to know, exactly how to get started. So yeah, besides vision and image generation, I also think text to speech, speech to text, these are interesting things to mess around with if you want to have like that speech element in your website or your project. And the last thing, I also, maybe not the most applicable, but I think it's cool to see, to understand like the concept behind AI, is the embedding. You can actually use this sort of like code here to see the actual vector embedding that we talked about earlier of any input that you give the large language model. So yeah, definitely go to this website if you're interested. I think there's so much to learn, and it's OpenAI, so it's all very obviously trustable, and from what I've seen, very easy to pick up. Like they make it very easy to understand, and they're good at explaining kind of like these more higher up concepts. So yeah. Okay, and then the last thing I quickly just want to go over before I end this workshop is going to be AI safety. I don't think you need to worry too much about like the safety having to do with just building a simple like API program using OpenAI in your project, but I think it's still good to know given like the state of the world that we're in right now. So AI safety, I think we can break it apart into three main parts, which are alignment, robustness, and governance. Alignment generally just means we want the AI and what it's outputting and how it works to align with our human values. So for example, if we're making like an AI recruiter, we'd want to make sure that it's actually recruiting people based on things that us humans find valuable, like skills and merit, and not like some other random demographic value or something that it sees in the data. Robustness just means the AI is doing things correctly and it's doing its job, so it's not susceptible to hacking and just like is able to correctly predict what it's supposed to predict. And then governance just means us humans are able to make laws that are able to regulate the safety around AI, just because so people can't abuse it and do things that they're not supposed to. So yeah, and I think that's the end of my workshop. I really hope you learned something new, and I look forward to seeing you guys implement AI into your projects.